This podcast is brought to you by the Heldridge Hotel, New Brunswick's only 4-star hotel and a preferred hotel of Rutgers football fans. The Heldridge helps you make the most of your game day weekend, providing premium accommodations in the cultural heart of downtown New Brunswick. Restaurants, bars, theaters, parks, museums, and more are only steps away. Whether you're traveling alone or with a large group, book your stay at the Heldridge and make the most of your game day weekend. Visit theheldridge.com today.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just beginning on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because FanDuel is your home for NBA live betting. However you want to play, now is the perfect time to join. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. 21 plus and present in Virginia. First online, real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
From NJ.com and the Star Ledger, welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights, with your hosts Steve Politi and Rutgers insiders Brian Fonseca and Pat Lenny. Let's start shopping.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Rutgers Rant. Politi, Fonseca, Lanny, all here. I got to tell you, to get the full Rutgers basketball experience right now, we've Fonseca got the flu, Lanny's mailing it in, and I just suck at my job. That's what we're doing right now. How you feeling, Brian? The big setup to announce that Brian had the flu and he's recovered.
I missed the Iowa game. I'm sure nobody noticed.
No, we all, believe me, we were all discussing it the entire time. We thought that you were the key. The fact that you weren't there might have been the key. That would have turned everything around. Alas, it was not your fault. Congratulations.
Yeah, I thought I was giving Rutgers the chance to rub it in my face that I don't show up to the one game a year that they actually go bazooka, nuts and actually beat Iowa. Turns out I missed the worst loss of the season. So I guess that's kind of a relief for everybody. But I will say, as I was telling you guys before, like I have gained newfound empathy for Dylan Harper, because if this is what he was dealing with at the start of January when he missed Indiana and played a rough 2 games against Wisconsin and UCLA, I give him credit for even stepping on the floor. I thought I was going to, I was halfway to my death. And maybe that's me being a little soft, but it was a rough week. And I've never been more glad to be on the Rutgers Rant with you two fellas talking about Rutgers basketball and be able to breathe some fresh air without thinking I'm dying.
You're a roll of Charmin, but still, we're happy. We're happy you're better, right, Pat? We're happy he's better.
Absolutely. It's just an unbelievable coincidence that the Rutgers basketball beat writer catches the flu in the same season as everyone else. Unbelievable.
It's almost like it's going around.
Almost.
The RU screw flu. All right, let's talk some basketball. 2 losses, one to Iowa, one to Oregon, one worse than the next. I mean, they were both really bad. I think we're at that point now where it is just hard to watch this team. No other way to put it. The Iowa game, Oregon, I guess it's on the road, a little bit more understandable, but it's just an effort thing. Like I just don't. You just don't see it. Fire. You don't see the want, the care in this team. And that's really what bothers me, I think, during the Oregon game. Like, we've seen some bad Rutgers basketball teams, right? We're pretty well versed in this. But we've seen bad teams that fight, that claw your eyes out, that want to kill you to try to win. I just didn't get that feeling against Oregon. It was just a kind of a mail it in second half performance, Brian.
Yeah, I don't like talking about effort. I really think that's kind of the lowest common denominator thing to point to when a team loses, right? Like it's the easiest thing to point out and say like, oh, they didn't win because they didn't try hard enough. Like they were trying pretty hard in the first half when they were hitting 9 of their first 11 shots, forcing 6 turnovers, playing pretty well. The issue is they just can't guard anybody. Some of that is effort. Some of that is just lack of talent and lack of discipline. It's the 26th game of the season, and guys are still flying for pump fakes and getting caught out of position and giving up blow-bys on the baseline and open threes. And some of that is effort, sure. I just think it's hard to quantify, effort, proper effort. And I think the issue is that they're just not very good, right? It was clear to me in the first half when they're, again, hitting 9 of their first 11 shots. I think it was 9 of 13. They're forcing turnovers. They're playing about as good as you could have hoped, and they're up 4 points. You just felt it was inevitable that Oregon was going to come around and win the game, which they did, and they won by 18, which was tied for Rutgers' worst loss of the season numerically with the Purdue loss at home, I still think the Iowa loss is by far the worst loss of the season because they were down 2 starters. They're a bad team to begin with, and that was your last gasp chance of salvaging anything, really, right? And then you just kind of lose by that bad team. You score 73 points against Iowa, and then they go to Maryland 3 days later and give up 101 points.
Right. Yeah. Not good. Yeah.
Just the defense couldn't have been worse. And like this stretch has been just appalling defensive effort. And it was like, it seemed like they got it together defensively. And now it's just the worst it's been all season. And that's saying something considering where this thing started defensively. To see the regression has just been kind of mind boggling. And maybe that's it comes across as effort, but there was just so many people out of position against Oregon, and they were getting so many wide open looks and breakdowns. You're just like, wow, man. Yeah. And that comes on the heels of that second half against Iowa when it was just zero.
There was that moment at the end of the first half against Oregon where you call the timeout. You think they're going to go 2 for 1. Instead, they foul right away. Like, what happened there? And then, you got Michael Davis guarding. Let's stop here at least. You call the timeout to set the timeout to set some kind of defensive play. The guy just blows right by him and gets a layup. There's no help defense. There's no one coming over to support him. The number of open threes throughout that game. They don't obviously they've never defended the rim. Like, I understand that. Like, that was a roster structural thing, but everything else defensively, they just don't do anything well.
That's it. Yeah. And that was so apparent in the Oregon game. I just kept thinking that over and over again. Like, the perimeter defense was just so bad. And you're saying, oh, okay, Oregon's making a lot of shots, but they were not even contested. Right. And that was really the issue for me.
Yeah, I mean, there was at least 3 times in the first half alone where Oregon does the same play where they get a guy catching the ball on the wing, driving down the baseline, draws the help, and then he just dishes the ball out to the other corner where a guy is just wide open. Right. And yes, credit to Oregon for making the open shots, but I mean, come on, like to Pat's point, the shots were wide open. I think the defensive issue, this wasn't the issue in Oregon, but it's been the issue all season, is as you mentioned, Steve, like the lack of a rim protector, which has been a staple for this Rutgers team under Steve Peichel. You've had Cliff Omori, you've had Miles Johnson. It's why they've had top 10 defenses 3 times under Steve Peichel. It's just not there. And Lathan Somerville, even if he was, better than he is now, which is hard to ask him to be better as a 6'10" freshman, there's nobody behind him either, right? Like it's not only just the lack of a rim protector, it's the lack of any depth behind the one guy you have at center. And that all kind of just snowballs. And then when you don't have a guy guarding the rim, you have to put more pressure on the rim, and that opens up the perimeter. So it's just a snowball effect of nothing really working right. And you have a bunch of guys who don't know what they're doing because they haven't been in the system. And it's, again, you give up 1 open 3, you give up 2 open 3s, you kind of drop your shoulders, you get disillusioned, and then you give up more open 3s, and again, it snowballs into an 18-point loss.
Right. And then on top of this, the other thing that's happening, and I think people are now starting to point the finger at Ace and Dylan and saying, well, they're not all they're cracked up to be. I just don't buy that. And it kind of makes my head explode. Like, I think they've just hit the wall, and I don't know what, if it's just a confidence thing, if it's just a long season thing, if they've just been defended to the certain point, or if they've just spent the entire year with this team on their backs and they're just out of gas with it. I don't know what the answer is. They're teenagers. But I think we're forgetting just how brilliant they were early in the year. And now we're seeing what happens when they're not that. Right? Like when they're not all American type players, when Dylan's not scoring 38 points, when Ace is not, shooting, whatever the hell he had in some of those games early on where it was, 11 to 16, when he's not making shots, the team is hopeless without them. Like if they don't play at a level that, justifies their draft status, if they have a bad game, like they've had the last 2 games in a row, forget it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to blame these 2 kids when they have been the keystones of everything, right? That is, like you said, makes your head explode. I'm kind of in the same exact boat, right? That's completely unjustified. If there's anything, I mean, the availability was an issue, right? That maybe if you want to get on anything, but what are you going to do? That's a product of circumstance, and it is what it is.
People are blaming them, though. I'm getting it all the time. Like my email box, like I wrote the column. The headline was and it wasn't a great headline, but Ace and Dylan deserve better from Rutgers. And people are like, well, I don't know. I think Rutgers deserve better from Ace and Dylan. And I'm just like, guys, like, are you watching the same thing I am? Like, I just don't. It's just unfathomable that you'd have that take. Like, I get it. Takes are everyone's got to take, but that to me just.
I think it's one of the many misguided things here, right? Like, I thought your headline was great because Rutgers and Steve Pikiell do owe Dylan and Ace more, right? They've done everything they possibly can do to win a lot of these games. They do what they were brought in to do, to be elite scorers and provide something that Rutgers has not had in a long time. What they haven't gotten in return is good defensive players around them, players who can hit open shots that they manufacture by being, the center of attention whenever they have the ball. And like, they're just the easy target, right, of people that are like, oh, we're losing this game because we're depending on freshmen. Oh, these, we can't win with 5-star one-and-done players. Like, that's the issue. Oh, they're looking ahead to the NBA and all this stuff. Like, clearly they have not, Dylan Harper was playing when he probably shouldn't, right? Beyond the call of duty, so to speak, when he could have easily just packed it in. And Ace Bailey was playing, again, the same deal. Obviously, he wasn't hurt to the same extent as Dylan Harper, but he was putting in really good efforts. The issue is that they've had no help around them. And then, they have the right to have a bad game or two. It stinks that they've had 2 bad games in a row together, right? But they've had great games for 3 months and it didn't work out. They have the right to have a bad game. And like you said, when they have a bad game, or 2 bad games this week, the results are Rutgers gets the worst loss of the season and humiliated in Oregon.
Right. Yeah. Let's talk Steve Pikiell for a minute. Like, and I think fans are rightfully angry at him. We've seen some, social media chatter, people looking at his contract. I mean, a lot of stuff like that. I don't know. He told us that his team's supposed to get better. Like, we're close. We're getting better. We're almost there. Like the Michigan State game when he made the famous 3.2 GPA line. That was the narrative. Like, if you can't see it, all right, we're right there. All right, well, now you've got your entire team back, except Manny, I guess Mag Boley, I get it, except for one guy. And the team's regressing. And by the way, it's the same thing that happened last year. And the same thing that happened the year before that. And you can point to injuries a couple of years ago. I get it. I understand that. But for the most part, this has become Rutgers basketball. Like, teams get the best teams in college sports, the best programs get better in February and March. Rutgers is getting worse again. It's damning.
It's a really good outline. There's no doubt about it. The regression is certainly, it starts at the top, right? There's nowhere else to really look other than that. And I think you kind of outlined it really well. It hasn't been great the last couple of years. And I mean, if this team just fades away the way it's going right now, I mean, I don't even want to describe it yet of what level disappointment this would be if this team continues to play this way down the stretch in this final 6 games or 5 games.
If they do, we're talking about missing the Big Ten tournament, right? Which I know we nitpicked how bad that would be, like the levels of badness. I still think it would be
right.
Missing the tournament in general just is all things equal, but I think it would be really, really bad to miss the Big Ten tournament, right? To not even give yourself a chance of believing in this miracle run. Would be a pretty abrupt end. I'll push back. Like, I think in the 21-22 season, when they made the tournament, the last time they made the tournament, they had a horrible start and then they got better and better as the season went on. And obviously they still lost to Notre Dame in the first 4. So the point is moot, but they were better in February than they were in November and December. And then the 22-23 year, they had a horrible February, March because they lost one of the more important players in Mawot Mag. And I know people will push back on how important Mawot Mag was. I think clearly his importance was outlined in the fact they traded without him. And last year's team was just bad. I don't think they got worse in February. I think they were just a bad team. I think the truth is the same for this team. I think this is just a bad team. Like that.
Last year's team was bad, right? They won 7 Big Ten games. Is this team going to win 7 Big Ten games? No.
There's 5 left. They have to win 2. Yes, I think. Can
you imagine this team could be worse in the Big Ten with 2 regrets, with 2 NBA draft picks?
The thing last year is they had, as bad as they were offensively, they were a historically bad offensive team. They were number 6 defensive team in the country because they had an elite rim protector in Cliff Omori, and they had guys who played defense. They played to the point about the effort, whatever. Like they played hard, and there were guys who kind of knew what they were doing, right? And it helps a lot to have Cliff Omori there. I cannot emphasize how important his thing is there. But my point is that they were good, like elite defensively, and that'll carry you to some wins. This year, they're mediocre defensively, and despite having two of the best scorers in the country, they're mediocre offensively, right? They're not having their best three-point shooting season under Steve Pikiell. I think this is their second best. They're not having their second best. They're not having their best two-point shooting season under Steve Pikiell. I think this is second or third. And the only difference between this year and most other years is that they're getting to the free throw line more often and making more free throws. That's the only real improvement offensively. And to have Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey on this team and to be 64th nationally in offensive efficiency is a humongous indictment, because we thought for years this team is bad offensively because they don't have the players. Wait till they have talent in the program. Now they have elite scoring talent and they still stink offensively.
It's pretty rough.
I remember thinking back to last year and the year before that, like one of the big things that was always said in press conferences was the speed limit term. We're going to hold teams under 65 points and make notes every time we hold them under 65. I would love to go back and count that this season.
Now it's the Autobahn.
Limit. There's no speed limit on this unit for sure. Crazy how fast that changed.
They do play faster, to be like offensively. There's more possessions in these games, so that does hurt. But that's not excusing how bad the defense is, to be clear. To go back to your earlier point, Steve, I think they're going to win at least 7 games. I think they're going to win at least 2 of the last 5 games.
All right, let's break that down. That's what that's so. I think it's 50-50 that they get to Indianapolis. Looking at the schedules, this is what I'm doing. I'm like, what did you do on your President's Weekend Sunday? Well, I was breaking down Minnesota's schedule for the last 6 games. I'm taking Penn State out of the equation. They're in last place, 3 wins. They look like they're going to stay there. So there's 4 teams playing for 2 slots. I did all the schedules, and we know Rutgers' schedule is at Washington, USC at home, at Michigan, at Purdue, and Minnesota. So 2 of those teams at 2 of the best teams in the league. So if you can assume, I'm going to assume they're going to lose those games. You're telling me they're going to win 2 of 3 at Washington, USC, and Minnesota. Possible. Okay. All right.
I mean, as opposed to those 2 away games against Michigan and Purdue, who are Big Ten title contenders, 2 of those other games are against teams you're competing against to make the Big Ten tournament in Minnesota and Washington. Theoretically, bad teams that you should beat.
Right. You were non-competitive. You just played 2 of the bottom teams in the Big Ten. You were you were down by 15.
Oregon is not
in bottom team. What do you mean not in the bottom 2? They're on the bottom half of the Big Ten currently.
They're 17-8. They're 17-8. They won the Players Era tournament, and they have more talent in their starting 5 than most teams have in their entire roster.
But if you look at the standings, technically speaking, they are in the bottom 9. They're a good team.
I understand. I understand what you're saying. I think calling Oregon one of the bottom teams in the Big Ten is disingenuous and a bit unfair. We could be very critical about a lot of things fairly. I think calling Oregon. Now, Iowa, losing to Iowa at home, now that's a bottom team in the Big Ten.
It's bottom team in the Big Ten. All right. Okay. Here are the other teams. So the teams they're competing with, Minnesota, Washington, and Northwestern. Minnesota's schedule, they're 5-9, so they're already a half game up. I don't know. They have at UCLA, loss, Penn State, Northwestern, at Nebraska, Wisconsin, at Rutgers. The far easier schedule. Far easier. There's no debate about that. Let's look at Washington's schedule. They've got 6 games. They're 4-10. So they're half game back in the standings, the shit standings here for 15th place. Rutgers, at Iowa, at Wisconsin, home against Indiana, at USC and Oregon. All right, about the same toughness level as Rutgers. Northwestern, if you want to keep them in there, at 4-11, so they're full game back. Means they've got to win it, probably 3 here. At Ohio State, at Minnesota, Iowa, UCLA, at Maryland. Doesn't look promising for the Wildcats. That's going to be tough. I mean, it pretty much could just come down to this game against Washington this week. That might be it. Because if you don't know, the tiebreaker for this is head-to-head. So if they lose, if they have lost to Iowa and they lost to Washington, you start now the teams that could be tied with you are, already have an advantage over you. So this might be it.
Huge. I mean, this reminds me of bowl breakdown season where we're examining the schedule and rating Minnesota's chances of the Mayo Bowl.
It's Bowling Green going to get the 6 wins, Pat.
Brings back great memories of like
it does.
It really does. But
this
yeah,
is what this show is. This is what we do here.
This is what we've become, and I love it. Like the absolute
teams are like, who might make the Final Four?
We're like, projecting the final spot of the 15 team Big Ten tournament, because that makes a whole talking about what matters in the postseason. Fantastic. But yeah, to your point, it is absolutely. You're competing against Washington for the final spot. You better win this game, and it's on the road, makes it difficult. And if you came into this season, if you come into this season thinking, all right, you're going to have a juggernaut game at Washington, in late February, you're just like, this is I can't fathom how far this has fallen.
Yeah.
Don't let them say Rutgers basketball did not play meaningful games in February this year. There's no more meaningful game than this Wednesday night. Seattle against Washington, a game that I think will determine it because they're going to beat out Northwestern. They're half game ahead. They have the head-to-head advantage. Northwestern's two best players are out for the year. They're done. They're done. Penn State and Northwestern, to me, are essentially no chance of catching up to Rutgers, right? So you're playing for that last spot. If you lose to Washington, you're down in the head-to-head, right? Mm-hmm. And as we counted down their last 4 games, 2 of them are automatic losses. They'd essentially have to sweep those last 2 games against USC and Minnesota to get their spot. And then Minnesota could help you in a way if they beat Northwestern, because that essentially eliminates Northwestern even more so. But that would also imply Minnesota's ahead of Rutgers. And then the last, to simplify all this bracketology stuff we're doing, if Rutgers beats Washington, I think they're in. If Rutgers loses to Washington, oh my God. It'll be a catastrophe of all catastrophes.
Do you think they're going to beat them? Have you seen enough from this team? You think they're to be Washington? You've seen enough that this team's going to go on the road? Are you just doing muscle memory that they can't, Dylan and Ace have to wake up? Is it just one of those things? Is it a matchup thing? What gives you that confidence?
Blind delusion. Like,
at least you're honest.
Like, can they lose? Yes. I mean, this team has shown they can lose to anybody. I just think that if there's any semblance of pride and any semblance of wanting to survive and keep the season going, then you win this game. Because again, Washington isn't good, right? They have a $2 million center, which
won 3 of their last 5.
If you combine these 2 rosters, maybe this is a NCAA tournament team. You get their center, you get Rutgers guards. I just think this is a must win. This is a must win game. This is a game Rutgers has to absolutely win. If they lose this game, then you know they just kind of threw up their hands and called it a season.
Pat, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this way. Does winning this game change anything for you? I mean, just say they do. They get, we're 15th. We made it. We're in Indianapolis. Does that
no, no, it doesn't.
You're still below 500. You still gotta.
If you make this tournament, like, what's the big deal? You were supposed to be a top 4 seed in this tournament, right? Like, so no, it doesn't change anything. It just shows at least what Brian was saying, that you didn't absolutely take the envelope to the post office and say, so long, 2025.
The only way they make the tournament, which they're not going to make the tournament, but the only way they make the tournament is if they win the Big Ten tournament. You can only win the Big Ten tournament by making it to the Big Ten tournament. And you can only make the Big Ten tournament if you win against Washington. At this point, Rutgers is playing a series of finals, right? It's a point where these are the games that if you lose, your season's over. So now this is kind of an early test for the Big Ten tournament. You win this game, you feel good about your chances of winning must-win games. You go into the tournament, your first-round matchup against, Indiana or whoever, and you say this is the start of our journey towards the impossible run to the Big Ten, the NCAA tournament. I don't know. Right. I just think that we open this episode talking about effort and caring and mailing it in and all this stuff, right? Like, this to me is going to be the ultimate litmus test of, are they mailing it in, or is there still some life, some pulse in Piscataway?
Fair enough. That's a good point. And I will say there is, and someone described it to me, it is a lonely feeling when you are not part, because it's one thing you're not part of the NCAA tournament. Okay, that's a lot of teams. If you're not part of championship week, I mean, that's like you were just not in. That's a full week of watching. I'm watching college basketball. Everyone's in championship week. Why? I mean, it's like what? At least go there and punch the card and go to Indianapolis. Have a freaking shrimp cocktail. At least say you were. Get the consolation prize is having your nose burned at St. Elmo's. At least get that. I had the bare minimum. Go see Kevin Fine and get yourself a steak downtown Indianapolis. Steak and shake at 2 a.m. Telling you all the things you do in Indianapolis. I keep on going if you want me to.
You should be the the tourism ambassador for Indianapolis. You're doing a great job of selling the city.
I'm going.
And also, this probably doesn't matter. Blue Ribbon picked Rutgers to finish 15th. If you finish worse than Blue Ribbon's prediction that everyone was mocking, I mean,
could you imagine?
That's also a pretty bad look.
Can you imagine the guy at Blue Ribbon's like, I overestimated them again. I knew it. Someone told me I couldn't get the bad. Isn't that hilarious? I'm gonna get. Someone's got to talk to him.
That'd be really good.
On the podcast.
Yeah,
you're making fun of that shit. Oh, Blue Ribbon. What do I know
15th.
about basketball? 15th. I don't know why I turned into the penguin there, but I just did. All right, questions. You want to take some questions? All right, let's take some questions. We got some good ones, and we have like a new spot on the Discord where you can just put your questions in there, and that's all people do. Don't discuss them, just leave questions, and it works. It sort of works for a while. Once we figured, told people not to discuss them there, it was great. See, Discord works. I'm happy about the Discord again. All right, time machine. Knowing what we know halfway through the year, I guess more than halfway through the year, we had a time machine to build out the roster from the transfer portal. Who is on it? Assuming you have guys have a general idea of the NIL budget and know you couldn't have Cliff or Balo in order for this to be realistic. You need a Cliff. Like I think the mistake. I don't know what the mistake is, and this is the discussion that's hard to have. We were sort of having in the Discord last night, and I think people are basing it on assumptions. I base it on assumptions. Like we don't have good information as to what happened in the portal. We do know that Rutgers did not have enough money in the portal to compete with the best team. That I can say for a fact. Like they were not shopping in the high end of the portal situation. They got lucky with these two kids. They wanted to come here and came here at a discount and came here with their own money. That doesn't mean, I want to be clear, that doesn't mean Rutgers did not give them NIL. Like I don't believe that either, but I do believe they could have made more elsewhere at Duke, at Auburn for Ace Bailey. Certainly, yes, but they have true NIL, which is the definition of players who be paid money regardless of when they went to college. Okay, so how much money did Rutgers have left for other players? We don't have a good answer for that. It's not a lot, though. And I think if I were to guess what the mistake was, Brian, and tell me if I'm wrong, like they needed 2 guys, right? And I think they tried to get 4 or 5. You know what I'm saying? Like they needed a stud 2 who could hit shots. They didn't get that. They needed just a rim protector, yes, but also like Ace Bailey's bodyguard, right? They needed like a tough guy, 14-10, power forward, stand next to Ace. Don't let him get knocked on his ass. Don't make him play out of position. Like the way he's responsible to be the team's best rebounder. They needed that. Like if you could, and you can't tell me that those 2 things are millions and millions of dollars, right? Like looking at what I know about college basketball, I think that was the mistake.
I don't know. Listen, again, to your point, it's impossible to do this exercise without actual data, right? This is all purely speculation. I guess in theory, instead of getting 4 mediocre players, which that might even be kind of kind to what happened here, you package the money, you get 2 really good guys, you get a solid center, two really good 2-way players, right? Because what happened is Rutgers got 4 one-way guys. 4 guys that could do well one way of the ball and not the other. So instead of 4 one-way guys, you get 2 two-way guys. 1 in the middle that can both protect the rim and score around the rim, like a guy that Florida State got, for example, a really, really good player. Just pulling that school out of my head.
Yeah.
And
the guy that Rutgers tried to get. Yeah, that's right.
And then you get a guy, maybe a wing or a forward or a guard, a guy who could score around the perimeter and that can guard somebody on the ball. Like that to me is the 2 guys they're missing. And yes, you don't have as much depth right? But Rutgers went 10 deep yesterday, and it never really felt like there was a guy coming off the bench that's adding anything. It's just so. Again, this is all hindsight. To me, the biggest thing I would do is get more money. Go out and try to raise more money. That is the more than who you get or what. I think increasing the pool of money you have to work with increases the pool of candidates you have to get. So if I can go in a time machine and go back and do that, that's what I would do. Easier said than done, obviously.
It seems like two mistakes were made, Pat. Like the first one is that, right? Like there wasn't enough money in the kitty. And I don't know how you solve that. I just don't, and I will never understand until I die. I will never understand that. Like how you got to this position where you had this once in a lifetime. We're not asking you to give $5 million a year. We're asking you to get a powerful, just this one time. I will just never understand that. Like, how is the sense of urgency? How is it not like, look, guys, this is it. This is the shot. Like, I just don't. I will
for
die.
The biggest season, we have this one.
I will go to my grave
opportunity to have these scorers.
Right.
We need guys that can come in and play this role, which is exactly what everyone said at the beginning of the season. We have all these role players that are going to do these roles, and it just never lived up to that. Like Tyson Acuff was going to be this great scorer, and you've seen it once or twice. Zach Martini was going to be this big physical, that fringe four guy that could body people. That hasn't happened. So I think is maybe just it just never came together. That's it. Like those things happen. Like that's what happens in sports.
They made mistakes. They made evaluation mistakes with the money they had. Not only did they not, that's the first problem. They didn't have enough. The second problem was with what they had. They went 0 for 4. Essentially, in the board. They
got a scrappy all-around player that they thought may be that defensive guy in Jordan Durkak, right? But it just hasn't. There's been zero consistency from all these guys, and that's probably the mistake. If you're looking for one thing, it's just there's been zero consistency, and that starts from coaching.
It just feels like a very easy sell on the surface. To your point, Steve, right? Like you go, there's a lot of Rutgers alums with a lot of money. And I know some of them are adverse to name, image, and likeness, but it just feels so easy to say, listen, I get it, but this is our one chance of going to the Final Four. This is the only chance Rutgers will ever have of having these high caliber players on the roster. We have them already. We just need to fill around them. We just need a little bit of money,
right? And
it will be the most fun 4 months of your life. So instead of giving Rutgers $3 million to name some building after you, right? Just give $3 million, get a center, and you'll be in San Antonio in April, having memories that'll live on forever. I cannot understand.
Time machine, forward and backwards.
The time machine. Although, it didn't seem like you needed the time machine to see it at the time. You saw it at the time. That's what's frustrating. All right, some more questions. A lot of coaching questions. Hi, Steve. What if Rick Pitino or Dan Hurley were coaching Rutgers, just two of the best recruits in the country? Do you feel like they would be in the same position? Talk about things we can't know. Would they have
what if Pat Riley was coaching this team? Do you think they'd be better?
Would they have let them in that position? Like, there's a reason why Dan Hurley's not the coach here. I think he saw, right? Reason why I think they understand. Like they need play. This Rick Pitino is not in the Hall of Fame because he's a great coach. But like he's also had players. Like he's a guy who understands that. Like he took Seton Hall's best player. Like I don't know if you've seen some of these. I don't know if you see Adam Zagori's done a great job chronicling everything Rick Pitino says, and some of it is just like he just had a comment. I think a couple of days ago it was like, "Yeah, I'm not recruiting in high school right now. We're losing these 4 guys who are 25 years old. I can't replace them with teenagers. I need adult." He just. Statement where it's clear, like, all right, I'm going back in the portal. I got a sack of money from my vitamin water guy. Oh, we're gonna go buy some more players next year. That's how Rick Pitino's done. Would that have worked at Rutgers? His system's not working with this. I mean, with this current roster.
Is the question if Rick Pitino was coaching his team, would they be better? The answer is yes. I mean, obviously, Rick Pitino is the greatest coach in the modern era of college basketball. It's not even close. Like, of course they'd be better. I mean, what kind of question is
that? There's also this sense of like, okay, these are fiery guys.
On line 1, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay,
Rick Pitino is taken
from the UNC guy.
That's the Final Four. What are we talking about? Mike Krzyzewski won at one place. Rick Pitino
one place.
He's won national titles at 2 different places. He's taken 3 different schools to a Final Four. He's gonna take St. freaking John's to the Final Four.
Okay.
Anyway, good.
The point I was trying to make
is column idea.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great one. You see Danny Hurley walking off the court screaming at fans, and you see Rick Pitino, just like they have this fire and energy that brings out like emotion. Like this Rutgers team has been emotionless, and that's a big part of Steve Pikiell's personality, right? Like that's the one time I remember this whole season, Steve Pikiell getting fired up. I remember Brian wrote about it at the time. I forget exactly which game it was, but it was that like last ditch, like come on, guy, like just don't see that.
Yeah,
right. Danny Hurley would be screaming at this, you know.
My problem with this, and this is how I'm going to eventually frame it in the column. I'm just getting there, trying to explain how I feel about Steve Pikiell right now. It's not that I feel like he is a bad basketball coach. I'm wondering if he is still the right basketball coach for this program in a lot of ways. And it's not because he forgot or he wasn't a good defensive coach. It's just that the game has changed now, and I don't know that his skill set suits it. And that's what would concern me if I'm at Rutgers. Like, I just don't know if what he did well the first time around is possible to do anymore in college basketball, period. But if it be possible to do a place like Rutgers, like, and that's kind of what would concern me. You know, it's just like you need a salesman, you need a fundraiser, you need a CEO, and you've got a guy who likes to coach basketball. I guess that's what I come back to. And I don't know, like, I'd love to see Steve Pikiell prove me and a lot of people wrong with that, but I mean, it ain't looking great. Where we are right now, if you're him, this is going to be you've gone backwards each year since you've gone from second round, first 4, NIT, no NCAA tournament, NCAA tournament with 2 NBA. Like where's this go? Like, what's coming back next year? Like, the trend lines are not great. It's not a great situation to be in for Steve Pikiell right now.
Sure. The positive thing is, in this era of basketball, it's easier than ever to completely flip things, right? Like this.
You have the money. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's why I think revenue sharing is going to provide an opportunity for that. Now, I don't think it's going to necessarily be the cure-all, but Rutgers is going to have essentially a blank canvas next season, right? The entire roster is going to be gone pretty much between graduation, NBA, transfer, right? I don't know how many guys are coming back. I don't know who's coming back at this moment. There's going to be so many scholarship spots open, right? So you're going to have the opportunity to fill those through the portal. And how they do that this year with the increased pot from revenue sharing will be interesting. If he's able to completely turn this around in 1 year and turn this back into a program that even is back to where it was before, as a mediocre program that finishes in the top 10 in the Big Ten, it sneaks into the NCAA tournament, then he really buys back some of that goodwill. If he's unable to do that, and next year is kind of a repeat of the last couple of years, then I kind of agree with your point here, Steve, where the trend isn't going well and it's hard to kind of spin a positive future forward the way things are going.
Yeah. Just to sum that up, it's right. The player development concept that we've talked about extensively in football, and can that exist in this new modern era of college athletics? We'll see. I don't know. It seems like no is the answer, right? Like,
not right now. No.
Can you have a 5th-year player on your roster? Like, is the idea of Lathan Somerville being one of the best players in the country when he's a senior, is that even possible?
Great question. Yeah.
Well, look at Oregon, for example. I looked up their balding big man because I was fascinated with him. I honestly had no idea about him. I think he's a 4th-year senior. He's from Oregon. He was a 5-star center, went to Oregon, and now he's stayed at Oregon for 4 years, right? And now he's one of the better bigs in the Big Ten. It's not impossible. Oregon just has, infinite purse strings, and
it's not impossible when Phil Knight is signing the checks. It's not, a little different.
I'm just saying it's not impossible. It's just a lot harder in this modern era. I agree with that, certainly.
All right, it's questions on Dylan and Ace. We had a bunch of them, and this one's referring to a column where I put that nothing's going to change their draft status. You said that this season won't change their draft position for Harper and Bailey. Is that really true? Mentally checking out of important games, playing no defense, etc., has to factor into NBA evaluations. They can't blame everything on injuries, flu, and coaching. No, I think it's true. Like, I don't think there's, and here's what it is. Like, I don't think like they're not new players coming in, right? Like here's the pool of players in this draft. No matter who you shake it up, Ace and Dylan are going to be better than all but 5, like all but 3 of them, right? Like Cooper Flag 1. I don't know. I think Ace at this point 2. What do you think? Ace. I think Dylan's top 5 still. I don't think anything's happened here that's going to change the fact that in Brooklyn, in whenever that is, April, May, June, they're going to be 2 of the 5 players drafted. Am I wrong, Brian?
No. And I don't know why people keep bringing this up. People are still asking if it's possible that Dylan and Ace come back because Cooper Flag.
Oh yeah, it's Cooper Flag's fault. That's why he started this.
I'm very closely to certain that he didn't actually mean that, right? I think he's either joking or brought that up to kind of agitate the national.
We don't like to go back to college for another year. I think that's what he's saying. I'd love to be back here.
Yeah, so would I. I'd love to be back for another year of college. Everyone would like to be back for another year of college. But Cooper Flag isn't going to come back for another year of college. Like, it's not going to happen. Right. And Kevin Gingler had a great thread in one of the Discords where this is a theme at Duke. Like, Zion Williamson said he'd be back for another year at Duke, and obviously he didn't come back. Cooper Flag is the number 1 pick in the NBA draft this year by leaps and bounds. There is no doubt about the fact he's going to be number 1. Why would he come back to college? He's not, and neither are Ace, and neither are Dylan. And they're still all going to be top 3 picks in the NBA draft because they are elite talents. Yeah. Like what are you talking about? What are these people talking about mentally checking out and like all this? Like what are you guys saying? Like, did you watch these guys score at the level that they do all season and think NBA scouts are going to watch like 2 games this week and say, oh, well, Dylan isn't going 100% in the final minute against Iowa. He pulled up for that 3 instead of going to the rim. Maybe we should drop him to 7 on our draft board and draft the kid from Illinois who scored 6 points at the rack 2 weeks ago. Like, what are we people saying, dude? Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey are going to go 2-3 in some order. I think Ace is probably going to be number 2, but it depends on how the lottery shakes out, how teams view him. I just cannot envision a world where either of these guys are not top 5 picks. I just can't. I just don't. You're looking for reasons not to draft them. Yeah. If you don't, I just don't see a world where they're not.
And this is a fascinating thing for me. Oh, go ahead, Pat.
I was going to say the things that people are criticizing them, even in this question, lack of effort, lack of defense. Those are things that don't exist in the NBA anyway, right? Like, you take these great attributes, the scoring, the distribution, and you see the talent, and you see like, okay, yeah, this is kind of how the professional game is played anyway. So
trying to play on Team Shaq at I watched like 13 seconds of that. I'm like, this is not something for me. All right, the other part of those, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about the NBA draft, but I am curious, and I hope Rutgers has a plan, like a PR strategy, something plan in place to figure out how to still capitalize on that moment and not make it about the fact that Ace and Dylan were on a bad Rutgers team, but to make it that Ace and Dylan were at Rutgers. That to me is going to be really fascinating. Like Steve Peichel,
really good.
Like, he's got to be there in a tux. He's got to be like, you've seen these drafts, like Jay Wright over the years, sitting there in the front. Like, they have got to figure this out. Like, this can't, you know what I'm saying? They still went to Rutgers. Like, it's still there's the kids tomorrow, the next generation of recruits, they're all sitting there watching the Iowa game. They're not up watching Washington on Wednesday like we will be. They've got to be a way to make that, spin it as a positive. I don't know how you do it, but going to be fascinating to see if they can.
Well, Rutgers PR has done a great job this season of really emphasizing all the good things about this program. I say that sarcastically. Now
you're going to trim that clip, or you'll never get another interview again. There's going to be a little lull here in the podcast for 4 seconds at the 42-minute mark.
Here's all you need to know. Last night during the All-Star game, Keith Smith, the guy who covers the NBA, said, a little aside, how is Rutgers this bad with 2 top 3 NBA draft picks? Guys in the NBA are taking a night off and saying, wait, what's going on at Rutgers, right? And that's happened sporadically this season. It's going to happen even more so during the draft process. People are going to watch them kill it at the combine, draft talk leading up to the draft, and people are going to keep asking themselves, how in the world was Rutgers this bad? It's going to be a recurring question until draft day. It's going to be a recurring question during their NBA careers. It's going to be a question that follows them the rest of the time, right? So as much as Rutgers can try to squeeze out, this, and they should, right? I just don't think they'll ever be able to rid themselves of the stench, right? Like anytime at least this regime, tries to recruit a 5-star kid to Rutgers, every opposing coach is going to say, did you see what happened with Ace and Dillon? You want to go there?
Yeah,
after
but
what
it's
they did
still,
to those guys?
at the end of the day, Ace and Dillon, that process worked out exactly the way they wanted it to. There's if everything goes well in the NBA draft like it's supposed to, that's the blueprint. They came here and it worked out. They had their dream NBA aspirations play out perfectly. Regardless of how the season happened, they had their one and done year, and they still, I guess that's the pitch you would make.
But that would happen if they went to go play in New Zealand,
Yeah.
or if they went to go play in Lithuania, like LaMelo Ball. Like playing at Rutgers, I guess it's to Rutgers' credit that they didn't completely tank their NBA draft stock. But really, there was nowhere to go but down, right? So I guess in theory, it's a positive that they stayed level. But I don't think Rutgers gets credit for them being top 3 picks because they were going to be top 3 picks anyway. It's not like they've developed.
Right.
I'd be hard pressed to think of one thing that Dillon and Ace have developed at.
Sure.
You guys could tell me if you can think of one. I can't. Have you seen Ace Bailey become a better defender? Have you seen Dylan Harper become a better defender?
I don't know. Yeah. No. All right. More questions. Let's see. Fan base. As a reporter, is it better to be associated covering a long-suffering fan base or a winning fan base? Examples: Alabama, Patriots, Buffalo Bills, Rutgers. I think just a large fan base. Look at this part. We just want a lot of people reading our coverage. Like, I don't know if it's good or bad. Maybe good, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I think you'd rather have the Alabama fan base than the the Jets fan base, perhaps. Interesting question, fellas. You got a thought?
I guess it depends. The thing with Alabama, right? If you cover Alabama football, if they lose one game, it's the end of the world, right? Like losing a game at Rutgers, people get really upset, whatever. But if you lose one game at Alabama, the program should be disbanded. Nick Saban should be, marched out in front of the entire Tuscaloosa Square and like shamed in front of everyone. Like it's a whole different level of expectations. Right. So I don't know which is better because I don't have the experience of covering in Alabama, but I can certainly it's very clearly vastly different, not only in the size of people paying attention, but the intensity.
Right. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I'm surprised. I will say this. I am surprised. Like there is not a lot. Like if you were to tell me right now, Pat, like football's just a bigger deal at Rutgers. Like there is not the level of, and there's more interest after the Illinois game by scores and scores than there are these basketball games. Like
absolutely. Yeah. I totally agree. And it's the biggest season. It's just kind of crazy, but that's true. To answer the bigger question, like I don't think it matters one way or the other to be a reporter. You're just try to stay down the middle and cover it as it unfolds. So I guess the interest you could get caught up in the hype, and I think that's a bad thing.
True, that's a good point. Yep. All right, the last question: over under. I'm setting the over under for the line for the number of Rutgers men's basketball wins in the last 5 games at 1.5. Are you taking the over or the under?
It's a good line.
1.5. Okay. What do you think, Brian? Who are you taking?
Taking the over.
Oh, okay. Pat?
Over 2, yeah.
I'm hammering the under.
Really? Like, I just
really? Really? I sat there and I don't know. Maybe the flu could have contaminated your brain.
Maybe that's maybe a little delusional. Yes.
Like there's no Iowa without their 2 best players. I mean, they were terrible. They lost that game by double digits at home. Like there's no really about this. I don't know. I see a team that's a borderline pulling the plug and getting ready to go. This is like, we say this about pros, getting ready for golf season. The clubs are in the trunk. I guess that's not a thing in college basketball. But man, I'm not saying I would be surprised if they won 2. I'd be surprised if they won 3. I would certainly be surprised by that.
Sure. I see 3 winnable games there, right? I see
definitely
Washington,
3 winnable games. Yep.
Washington, USC, and Minnesota.
Minnesota.
I look, if they win 1 game, am I going to be shocked? No, but I have to think there's something there, right? Maybe I am being a bit naive here. Again, this is obviously surprising coming from me. You think I would be the one that says they're going to win 0 games, but I just think
I think
there's 2 wins there. I think there's 2 wins there. I really do.
All right. We'll see
what about you, Pat? What do you got?
Yeah, I agree. Those three that you said, I think they can win 2 of them, and gets the over.
All right. Good job for the questions. Thank you for putting them in the proper spot in the Discord and making my life easier. All right. What else we got? We got some wrestling.
Wrestling has one duel left Wednesday night against Penn.
Okay.
And
Penn? How are we playing Penn at this stage?
It's like a last. There's a good relationship between the schools, and it's actually really fascinating, like New Jersey storylines. It's a cool duel, and but anyway, the point I wanted to make was that at the beginning of the season, the big quote, the rah-rah quote was, "We're sick and tired of being the 13th best team in the country." And coming into Wednesday, they'll be ranked number 12, which in the grand scheme of this athletic department and what has unfolded during this winter season is like winning the gold medal in Paris of like success.
Remember all those angry emails from the wrestling fans about the program has hit its ceiling under Goody.
Like, it's so consistent and stable. They had the great win against, the top 10 win. And so, but I know it was a rah-rah speech and quote to say, like, all right, this is the year we're going to be in the top 10. And maybe they can pull that off at NCAA. So we'll see. But they dismantled Michigan State in its most recent win. And, I just find it funny that that comparison is to look back on is quite brings a smile to my face. And then just to see like how other things have imploded, that Rutgers wrestling has just been so consistent the last 5, 6, 7 years. And if that's the level of complaint you're going to have as a fan, then you really got to make some adjustments.
Right.
I think it's kind of got you thinking like, people weren't happy always sneaking into the NCAA tournament on the bubble. Maybe people would sign up for that right now versus obviously what's going on in basketball. So
yeah, I think so.
Sometimes staying in the same place isn't bad when the opposite is sliding backwards.
The song for Rutgers is "One Shining Tuesday in Dayton, Ohio." Yep.
They'll take that back. Believe me. Other Olympic sports, baseball avenges Rutgers basketball. They go to Georgia and win 2 games out of 3 against Kennesaw State, the rival of the Rutgers athletic department. They have gotten their revenge.
Taking the series. Did they play at Kennesaw? That's great.
It was in Marietta.
Okay. That's I don't know, Kennesaw.
I don't know if that's Kennesaw State's stadium proper, but it was in Georgia. I don't think you could play up in Jersey. I think wasn't it snowing this weekend?
Right. I don't know. Could be.
I didn't leave the house, Right.
Yep. Okay. Men's lacrosse losing again to Army. I saw, and that's going in the wrong direction. Women's basketball, that's been in the wrong direction. Anything else?
Looking the softball schedule, it's not coming up, but I think they
slayed somebody. I saw
softball slayed East Texas A&M.
I didn't see the East part. I just saw Texas A&M. I'm like, whoa! All right. There's an East Texas A&M.
Sorry, that's what I saw.
Is there a West Texas A&M? That seems very specific.
I know.
Well, they're 5-5. They split their first 10 games of the year, which is incredible. They played 10 games already.
Did you see the stat? Speaking of that 500, did you see the stat I put on Twitter? That Steve Peichel and Greg Schiano combined over the course. This is pretty remarkable numerically. And people are like, take a shot. I'm not taking a shot. It's just fascinating. 16 seasons of Steve Peichel. Of Greg Schiano plus 9 seasons of Steve Peichel combined add up to 238 wins, 238 losses. They are 500 after all those games, all those seasons. That's wild.
A quarter century of mediocrity.
And I pointed that out really not as a judgment thing, more of like, wow, that's kind of crazy. And someone did the math on that.
It's very fitting. It's very fitting. It's, I think, very telling. But again, 500 is better than a losing record, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Let's sign off on that. 500 is better than the losing record. They put that on a billboard, folks, on the Turnpike. We've got it here. I don't know when we're going to record again. I can't imagine we'll do one after Wednesday regardless. That seems very soon. But we'll be back to talk about where we're at and see if we're going to Indianapolis or not. Until then, if you're still listening, man,